Yolanda, it's so wonderful to have this time with you. Welcome to the Learn to Listen series.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored that you called me and asked me to be a part of this. So, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, you are amazing, and I've loved all of the contributions. In particular, we've been able to engage during this pandemic time, and you're just amazing. You really are amazing at what you do. And so I'd love for you to share with our listeners just about who you are, where you live, just your stream and operation, both in your professional realm and ministry. So thank you.
Okay, absolutely. So, of course, my name is Minister Yolanda Rountree. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and live outside in the Metro Detroit area in the suburb now. I've been in ministry since I was 17, and I'm 43 now, so that's a long time. I'll let you calculate how long that's been. But I've always grew up in the church, and I've always had a passion for Christian music and for dance. I started dancing and taking classes in modern ballet and jazz in, gosh, I think 86 when I was 10 and 11, and just kept dancing from then. In January of 93, when I was in my senior year of high school, that was the year I got to choreograph our all city dance competition. And it basically all city is just a competition for all the high schools in the city. And then once you win all city, then you'll go to the States and blah, 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 blah. And it's only for high school. And so that's the year that I choreographed. It was my senior year of high school. And I met Sondra Jackson, who was my dance teacher from 17 up until about 39, 40 when I actually left the ministry. And basically, I had never seen Christian dance or Christians dance to gospel music in a modern way. I heard of Alvin Ailey, never knew who he was, never saw a ballet from him, but I knew who he was, but that was it. I had never seen Revelations, but I'll never forget when I was at Awe City and I saw it and I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I just want to dance for God and dance to his music and dance for his glory. And I remember going up to her and I said, Sondra, I just want to take classes with you. And she was like, fine, this is where we're at. Come here on Tuesdays and Thursdays and you can learn and dance with us. And that's when I started dancing for the Lord at the age of 17. Um, Even though I was in the word in the church, I really didn't understand the marriage between how the Bible really reflects ministry of the arts. So you go to church, you learn, but technically at church, he's teaching on an overview. He's teaching, trying to reach everyone, but there was never any real teaching on ministry and dance. I didn't get that from church. I got it from ministering at different events, but then I also got it because the dance ministry that I was a part of, we were recognized as one of the top ministries in the country. And I remember us going to Florida, and that's where I met Elder Laisha Walton, I met Dr. Pamela Hardy, and I met Reverend Aisha Miracle. So those three people have been the ones that's been my leader in my life and that's been mentoring me and guiding me along the way. So I learned about the Eagles Institute in 2010. I started taking classes and I graduated in 2011. Then I started assisting Dr. Pamela. So I assisted her from 2011 to 2018. And I believe that like as a leader and if you have a passion for something, you do need to work under the people so that you can learn. And that's what I ended up doing. I worked under her for a long time, but I continued to stay with my ministry that I was a part of. I continued to just learn. I was in the word, so I became a licensed minister through the Eagles, but then my church stepped in and it was like, nope, we want you to be licensed through the church. And so I ended up becoming a licensed minister through my church. So I've been going through this path for a very, very long time. And because of Reverend Aisha and Dr. Pamela Hardy, they're the ones that prayed for me, prayed with me, and helped me to really hear and listen to what God was calling me to do in the season, my seasons, because there were many different seasons that I had to go through. And what ended up happening at birth, my 2-day dance intensive is a dance, mind, and music intensive that I host here in Detroit. And I've been doing that since 2013, but it was God's voice, his vision, and it was my mentors who actually helped guide me into doing something that honestly I was afraid to do. I know the Bible tells us that we should not be afraid. God did not give us the spirit of fear, but that was just one thing that really scared me, was stepping out on faith and really listening to what God wanted me to do and doing it. And so that's a little bit about me. I know that was a long story, but that's how I ended up where I am today. It started out when I was 17, dance, and then I saw a dance to gospel music, a modern dance to gospel music, and that just sparked my passion to be able to go do what God has called me to do.
That's so good. And we never know exactly what it's going to be for somebody's life that will send them off this road onto a new path and a new journey. So it's so beautiful that God used that for you, and then the contributions you've made. I mean, it's just countless what you've done to contribute. So I know I've reaped from the benefit of it, and I know that there are a multitude of others that have as well. But I appreciate just with this whole Learn to Listen series, how you already articulated that God spoke to you and that you knew that you needed to listen. I'd love to hear more about that for you. What are ways that God communes with you and that you have cultivated a learning, listening relationship with Him?
Absolutely. So if I take up too much time, just cut me off. It's okay. So I'll start off with the vision. So I've always received visions from God. In fact, when I was a kid, I remember even up to the age of 5, I would have dreams of me being a disciple for Jesus. Um, and I used to call them nightmares because I always knew how the dream was going to end. And it was very hard for me. Then I started having dreams of death. And every time I would have a dream of someone dying the next day or within hours, they would pass away. So I started to suppress my visions, and I was afraid to dream. I was afraid to just see things. I was afraid to hear things. And I suppressed them for a very, very long time. I would pray every night that God would not give me any dreams. And I didn't know it was a gift back then. When I say back then, I'm talking about all the way up until I was about 20 years old. I would just pray, not to see anything, not to hear anything, because for me, they were always bad. I didn't realize that that gift of knowing was something that can help me as well as help others. And so it took a while for me to learn how to listen. It took a while for me to learn how to see. It took me a while for me to learn how to hear and how to understand and how to obey. It took me a while. I'm not even gonna like sugarcoat it. And I remember telling my pastor, she's a pastor, but she was the first lady at the time, and I told her about some of the things that happened. I'll give you an example. One time, I had a dream that I was having a conversation with my father, and toward the end of the dream, he said, "I'm just tired," and I was like, "Well, you can go, Daddy," and he said, "But what about you and your sister and brother?" I said, "We'll be fine. You can go. We can handle this." He said, "You for sure, baby girl?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm for sure." He's like, "All right, I love you." I was like, "I love you too." As soon as I said, "I love you too," the phone rang and my dad had passed away. So this is something that like I've always had in me. And when that last time happened, because that was the last time I opened myself, well, it wasn't the last time, because after that, after I spoke to my first lady and told her what happened, she started giving me books to read about why I have this gift and how to use it and how to cultivate it. Because I didn't know how. I always thought it was a bad thing. And so it started with me just really learning how to listen. I didn't know how to listen. God would talk to me and he would tell me things, and I would try to put whatever he told me off on other people. So like he'll say things like my intensive. He said to me, This is what I want you to do, when I want you to do it, and how I want you to do it. And I didn't think it was for me, so I tried to push it off on someone else on my ministry that I was a part of, and they got scared and they didn't do it. And so one day I was in the closet because I was like, I just need to hear from you. I know you're telling me what to do, but, and I felt it in my spirit, and I was like, but I'm not being obedient. So the first thing I did was I went into an actual closet, because everyone said, go in your closet, go in your prayer closet. And I didn't realize that a prayer closet could be anything at this time, because this is way early in my career, or in my, not my career, but in my steps to follow what God has called me. So I actually went into a closet, a dark closet. I closed the door and I remember just laying there, and I kept talking over God. I just kept talking over him. Every time he would say a word to me, I would say, but, or I would just keep talking. And I remember this so vividly because this was the first time I ever did this. I was in the closet for 4 hours. And I finally had to learn how to meditate, just shut up and listen. It was really, really hard, but I was longing to hear his voice, and I was longing to hear what he wanted from me. And after that, it was still hard, but it became easier for me to hear what he was saying. Um, at one point, like, his voice had gotten so faint that I couldn't hear what he was trying to say. And I remember that the closet stopped working for me. And so I had to find other avenues to hear him. And another thing that I ended up picking up when the closet stopped working for me was listening to music, but not really listening to it. Having the music up so loud that I was drowning everything out in my mind, because I'm a planner. And so what happens is I started planning everything in my head. Like, I need to do this by 10 o'clock. I need to do this by 12. I need to do this by 1. Like, I plan out my day. My husband hates it. And I could never shut my brain off. And so it got to the point to where I had to cut the music up really, really loud. And then I was able to hear him again, and be able to listen to what he was telling me that I needed to do. I'm going to put this all together because I'm going to tell you a story in a second. So then when the music stopped working, the closet wasn't working, the music wasn't working. The next thing that I picked up was painting. And this is recently. So when COVID happened, I couldn't hear him as clearly as I wanted to because it was all this chaos and it was piling up in my mind, and I just could not concentrate and I couldn't hear him. And I was like, I need you to give me something, Lord, so that I can hear you. And he put a paintbrush in my hand, and I could paint for hours, and I could hear him so clearly. Oh, one more other thing that I picked up was walking. I would go, we have a trail that's 30 miles long, and I would spend 2.5 hours just walking and listening to him. So listening to me takes practice. I'm always learning to listen, and I'm always learning when I listen. See, I put that together. So I'm going to tell you this quick story about listening. So when in June, and you're going to see how God works when you are obedient and when you listen to him. In June of 2012, Dr. Pamela and Reverend Aisha was in Detroit for a conference, and I was there to help out with whatever they needed. Dr. Pamela had to leave early, so I had to assist Reverend Aisha the entire time. Just because I was here, I can take her around. We were in a car, we were taking Dr. Pamela to the airport, and I told them about my vision of El Olam, which means God of everlasting, 2-day intensive. And I told them the dates too. So I knew the dates. I knew I wanted to do this, and I just told them the dates. And it's like, oh yeah, we want to be a part of it. Reverend Aisha takes the dates and put them in her calendar, right? So she already planning on being here for these dates. Me, I'm just telling them about a vision. I'm not even being serious about this. And so that's the end of discussion. So they're like, you should do this, blah, 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 blah. July comes around. One of my good friends who's the director of my board for my 501c3, who's been my right hand throughout everything, called me, who was my client at the time. She wasn't even my friend. And she said, remember you told me about putting on your conference? She's like, we need to meet so that we can talk about how we're going to make this work. So we had a meeting in July and wrote everything down of what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and what the timeline was going to be. She would call me throughout the year. I would not return her call. I was just like, I don't know why I was talking about this. God didn't really give me this vision. So then in November, God had a conversation with me and I was listening. I felt like I was in trouble. And he said, I gave you this vision for you to see through. He was like, your job here is to bring people closer to Christ. And this is one way that you can do it. And I was like, okay. So I called Pam and I called the team. I put the team together and in December, we started, well, we didn't start planning, but we started assigning responsibilities to everyone. But I knew that everyone wasn't going to work on everything because I'm not still serious about this. So then January comes around. We're not doing anything. Mind you, I don't have a venue. I do not have any registrants and I don't have any instructors. So I get a call from Reverend Aisha in January and she was like, remember the conference you were telling me you were going to do in June? I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay. She's like, I just want you to know I still have it in my calendar. Now, me not thinking that she could have turned down a lot of events. I'm at the point like, I'm not doing this for real. I'm just talking, right? So I said, yeah, I'm still going to do it, whatever. Don't have any money. Don't know how I'm going to do this. So in March, I still don't have a venue. I don't have any participants. And the only instructor I have is Reverend Aisha because she keeps calling me. So then in March, I was leaving from a career fair because I'm a recruiter by day. And I was leaving from the college and I was in a car. I had an hour and a half drive. And I had the music up, knowing that this is the way that God talks to me during this season. And he just starts talking to me and I felt like I was in trouble, like big trouble. Like I was in the car crying, like, I'm sorry, I mean, he just started pouring it on me and I could hear him so clearly. And then the last thing he said was, call your father-in-law. So I called my father-in-law and I was like, Dad, I want to do this event. I don't have any money. He was like, send me your business plan. So I had my business plan, remember, because we wrote it in July. Pam and I did. I sent it to him. The first thing he said was, you're not asking for enough money. Who says that, right? And then the second thing he said, yes, I will finance it. So then, as soon as I get off the phone with him, obedience and God working. Watch this. I get a call from the head of the National Liturgical Dance Network in Detroit, and she says, Yolanda, Reverend Aisha said you're doing this event. Do you have a venue? I was like, no. And she's like, well, the dance leader at Greater Grace Detroit, which is a mega church in Detroit, she said you can host the event there. So this place, the sanctuary, costs $10,000 just to rent out for a wedding. It seats 10,000 people. They rented the facility to me for $1,000 for 2 days, and I had access to the entire building, including the sanctuary. As soon as that happened, we started marketing word of mouth. And we ended up having 150 registrants the first year. In addition to that, in 3 months, remember, because we didn't start doing anything until March. In addition to that, I called my brother. His name is William Murphy. I don't know if you know his music. He has a church in Atlanta. We used to do plays. He's from Detroit. We used to do all these plays together. And Perilous Times is one of them. And I remember like how close we were as a community when we would do this play. Like we were all brothers and sisters. And so I just reached out to him. I sent him an email and said, hey, I'm doing this conference and I want you to be a part of it. He was like, I'm there. Like, this is another person who is really, really expensive. And he just took a donation. And that was the birth of El Olam Cares. El Olam Center for Dance and El Olam Cares, which is our 501c3. And so Listening is so important, especially when God is speaking to you, because he's telling you what he wants you to do. He's giving you answers. And sometimes he's not giving you answers. Sometimes he's just telling you something now so that you can be prepared for the future. I lost my mom, my grandma, my granddad, all in a year and 12 months. And every time I talk to someone, they always say, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. But remember that gift I told you about when my dad passed away? I got to talk to my dad one last time before he passed away. With my mom, I was able to be there with her as she was going through her transition. I was able to be there for my grandmother and my granddad. Most people don't get that. And so everything that I thought was kind of like a curse, it was really a gift given to me from God to prepare me for different things and to help others prepare for different things and different seasons in their life. And so it's important to listen, because you learn so much when you listen to what God is telling you, even if it's not for that moment. It could be for the next moment. And last year, every year, God gives me the vision and the theme for 2 years in advance. But I didn't get the theme for this year until last year, but it was canceled this year, 2 years in advance. It's really for next year, and it's new beginnings. And that's the thing for the intensive next year. So it's so important to just listen and be obedient, because when you do, that's when the blessings start. Even in death, that's when the blessings start.
Wow. Such a great story, and how God weaves everything together. I love the scripture that reminds us how he does everything for a particular purpose. He works all things together for the good. And when we can recognize that touch of God as something that is good and not something that's a curse, and push away fear and really welcome him in his presence. It's so powerful. I love how he speaks to you and how that's so unique for you. And some people would be similar, and others, it's just through reading the word or through a conversation, or there's so many different ways. So I love the uniqueness of you really starting more to embrace it, that's for you, Yolanda, how you receive from God. It's so beautiful. So you've cultivated this whole practice of listening with your understanding of how God cultivates in people different leadership qualities. What do you feel like are some of those important, valuable qualities that leaders should hold?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I feel like a leader, in order to be a good leader, the first thing you need to do is follow. And I followed a lot of leaders in the past, and I followed some bad ones and some good ones, and I learned from them. The first thing that I would say is communicating and listening would be like number one. It's so important that you're communicating effectively. You're giving clear directions. You're giving clear goals, and you're listening. So you want to understand what it is your team or your staff needs, and communicating and listening will always be number one. I think number two would be providing clear directions. When you give directions and you're not clear, that's when mistakes can happen. And so a good leader needs to make sure that the directions that they're giving out are clear directions. Number three would be they need to step in. So whenever something happens, a leader should know how to do everyone's job, in my opinion. I know it's difficult when you're the president. You can't learn and how everyone or really do everyone's job. But when you're a leader, I feel like, especially on a ministry level, it's really good to be able to step in when you need to. I'm a technology person, but I am not a social media person. Like, I post sporadically. I don't know how often we should post, but if I had to do it, I would do it. And that's what I mean by just stepping in. Learning to delegate is definitely a good one. And what I mean by learning, instead of just delegating, there's always different ways that you can delegate work, and it may not be the same way each time. So delegating would be my number four. My number 5 is having empathy. You have to know when to stop. You have to understand the feelings of everyone. I feel like leaders need to go through personality trainings. And I talk about this a lot whenever I go to different places and when I teach on leadership. And one thing that in the secular world or the work world, that I had to do was I had to learn how to read a disc, and that's just a personality assessment. And I had to learn how to read a report. And when I tell you, you can kind of understand a person's personality by the way they speak to you and by their demeanor. And so you'll know whether or not someone's a D who has a dominant personality, or someone who's an I who's basically they're an extrovert, they're a social butterfly, and an S is a steady Eddie, and they just want to do the same thing over and over and over again. Or the C, the compliance person, and that's the person that follows the rules. The rules cannot be broken. And so just understanding that, I feel like that's a way to have empathy for someone, because if someone has a dominant personality, their approach they don't like small talk. And that's kind of like my personality. I'm a DI. When I'm in an environment of people that I don't know, I just want to get to the point. Let's just get to the point. And so when I talk to people like that, I know how to respond to them. So, and when you don't know how to respond, someone could be saying something to you and you could take it in such a negative way. In reality, they weren't trying to be negative. They were just trying to get their point across. So having empathy is so important to being a good leader. Having the ability to influence. So as a dance leader, you have to influence your team to do the things that they don't want to do. You know, yes, you can do a calypso and roll on the floor. You know, yes, you can get that bop to your eyes. You know, so you have to have the ability to influence other, and then you want to do it in a good way. I'm always encouraging my students. I always tell them that they can do all things through Christ who strengthens. So he doesn't say you can do something. He doesn't say you can do a little. He says you can do all things through him. So that's one way that I try to influence my dancers when I'm talking to them. And then I always tell them that I maybe cannot do that anymore, but you can do it. And it's not because I can't, that I don't believe that I can do all things. It's just, I know how my body works and I know how your body works. So, so you have to have the ability to influence other. And then you also have to be training the next group of people to lead. And that's one thing that I am so honored to see right now is all the young ministers coming up and taking charge and ready to lead. And I was afraid at one point, because at one point I just saw the same people. I saw you, I saw Reverend Aisha, Dr. Pamela, I saw Amanda, I saw the same people. And I'm like, where's our younger generation? So we have to be willing to lead. And it has to be us leading, training the next person to lead at no cost. And I'm not talking about money or things like that. I mean, like, no strings attached. If you see something and you want to help someone out, you need to help them out. Hope would tell you, like, I just give her advice and I'm like, you can either use it or not use it, but I want you to get to the next level. And this is what I think some of the things you need to do. And Hope will call me the next day like, Yolanda, I'm so glad you called me. So it's, you have to be willing to train the next person to take over, because we're not going to be here forever. So a good leader is training up the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, I'm with you in all of those, but I do in particular appreciate that there's so many new ministers, there's so many new dancers, there's so many foundationally grounded, biblically sound artists that are rising up, that are both infiltrating in the Christian realm and in the ministry realm, but also in the marketplace, that they're out there and they're coming from a really solid foundational place where they're not going to waver, not get lost. So when I think not only do we step out of the way for that to come forth, but also to realize we need to encourage and bless and help to keep being the keepers of their dreams, what God's doing in and through them. So that's beautiful, beautiful understanding of what it means to be a leader. And those are quite amazing qualities. Continuing on, as we're looking at what's going on out there, I mean, you've done a lot of work in ministry, but I know you've got a lot of connections all around. What are you seeing happen today with arts and with dance? I look at your background, there's such beautiful array of such, a depiction of creativity around you. What do you feel like God's doing today in the world related to the arts?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So at the beginning of COVID, I will be lying if I said that I didn't go through a small depression, and I did. And I don't suffer from depression. Like I've never, ever remember being depressed in my life until this year. And I've been sad before, but never in a dark place. And in February, I broke my fifth metatarsal. So it's a bone in your baby toe. And it's something that can heal on its own. But the way mine was broken, I had to have foot surgery. So I had foot surgery in February. So as soon as it was time for me to literally start back dancing, COVID happened. And in Michigan shut down completely. And I remember during that time, I was just like asking questions, but I wasn't listening. I was asking all these questions like, what am I supposed to do in this season? And I just got really down, and I just started having this ridiculous pity party. And honestly, it was part of you when you started doing your series and I signed up to do the warm up. And I think that happened in April. So from February to end of February to all of March, it was just a really dark place for me. And it was because I couldn't hear. I think I was being stubborn and I didn't want to hear. And, but God was really talking to me. He was like, your assignment is not done. And I remember when I was just going through warm-ups with your series that you had, I believe, like I said, back in April, and I started to move again. And once I started moving again, then I was able to really relax and listen to what God is saying to me. I had to do a deeper dive in the word. Like I read the Bible every day, but I literally had to read more than what I normally would read. I had to just really listen to what he was calling me to do. And I was afraid that he gave me this gift. And then and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I thought he gave me this gift for it to be taken away. Even if I can't dance anymore, I've always wanted to just continue to teach his ministry. And I just felt like it was taken away. But when I saw that it could be done virtually, is what he started talking to me about. And it was just not virtually. There's so many ways that we can reach out to God's people who are not saved virtually, through social media, and even on the streets. And he started opening up my eyes to see where ministry is moving toward. Sometimes on a video, you feel like you can't feel what you can feel when you're in person. But in this season, God has shown me that's not true. When you have the word in you and you're able to minister it the way he wants you to minister it, where people can see him and not you, then you're doing what he called you to do, and you can touch people virtually. And that actually happened in one of my virtual classes when I was 100% virtual. And I remember we were on the last day and we had just finished all the choreography, and I was like, okay, let's just minister it. And I remember we were just ministering. The song had ended, and 15 minutes later, we're still ministering. And then when I realized everything, of course, I was just like, I just released, and then I just looked at the video, and I was just sitting there, and I just went into worship, just having the class minister back to me. because the class had known, some of my struggles. I'm a very honest person. And so when you ask me, where do I see God is moving through the arts today? I see that he's moving the arts virtually, but it's not going to end for us to be together. Now we need to expand what we've been doing before. So before we would go out and minister, someone may record, but now it's more like, no, we need to go out and minister, and we need to share it on all media platforms so that we're touching the masses, because you never know who's going to see what you just did for God in that moment. And you don't know where that person may have been. That person may have been on that table with a knife, getting ready to slit their wrist. And they're about to post a message on Facebook, and they see God telling them not to do it through you. So that's what I see. God has given me a vision of, for the next time we're able to host my intensive. In Detroit, they have this park, it's called Hart Plaza. And I see it so clearly because there's homeless people there, and but they host a lot of events there. But it's just an open space. So when there's not an event, there's just people, and I see all nationalities coming together to just minister to his people, but it's being videoed so that the world can see it. And it's not just in that one little area. So that's what I see God's doing through the arts today. And that's what I see what's going to happen in the future. And I just can't wait for that to happen.
Good. So good. So that's a part of your, like, even the creative process, because we've had to get creative on how we're disseminating the arts. So talk about that, about your creativity and your creative process.
Yes. So my creative process has been the same for years. The first thing that happens is I'll get a word, and I'll get a word or a phrase, and then I'll research the word or phrase. And then after I research the word or phrase, then I'll get kind of like what it is God is talking to me in this season to do. And from there, that's when I'll just start listening to music. But it's weird because I promise you, whenever I have like a theme of what I'm working on for that season, I hear it everywhere. Like I'll hear it from another pastor. I'll hear it from someone that's talking to me. I'll hear it from the TV. Like I'll hear it from so many different places. And then I'll start just listening to music. And it's funny because my phone sometimes will play random songs. And then I'll listen. I'm like, oh, this just matches up with the theme. And so then after that, so once I get the song, I go back to the scriptures that I had researched prior. And I try to imagine the scripture being ministered and not the actual words of the song. And that's how my process starts, especially when I'm choreographing a piece. That's how I choreograph a piece. So typically I will work from the middle and then work my way out. But like I said, this year I did start choreographing from the beginning of a song to the end, but it's really a visual process for me. So I have to see the movement. I have to read the word. I have to understand the word. I have to come up with a meaning for whatever that scripture or that passage is to convey in the song, to make sure that I'm delivering what it is God is calling for a piece to deliver. Another thing that I'm listening to music, I typically listen to it so much that I know every beat. Like I can hear the tambourines in the background. I can hear the drums. I can hear the piano. Because sometimes with music, that sometimes even though it's cohesive, everyone is doing something different. And so I'll listen to it to understand and hear everything about the song, and also the runs. So, when someone is singing, like what beats are they taking? What notes are they hitting while they're singing a song? So I'll listen to a song and I can sing every part and I can't sing. And I can do every beat in the song because I've listened to it so much that I know it. The only thing I do struggle with, I won't even lie about this, is that even though I know the beats and the melodies, because I study the scripture for the song, sometimes I don't know the words. And so I'm like, what did she say?
That's good. That's so good. You've got such a wealth of great wisdom and stories and everything. So as we're bringing this to a close, I'd love just to hear if there's anything that you didn't have an opportunity to share that you wanted to articulate to us and leave us with.
Yeah, so I do want to start back to the beginning of us talking about listening and learning. And the one thing that I want to leave with the Christian dance leaders and the artists of today is to first just remember that this is still God's season. This is not our season. This is God's season. And He has a plan for each and every person that is a part of His family in this season. So that doesn't mean that you have to sit there dormant because you feel like you're not utilizing your gift. Get up and move. Listen to music and just listen to what God is calling you this season. This is not a time to stay down, because if you're staying down, that could be one missed opportunity to help save a soul for the body of Christ. So if I wanted to leave something to the leaders and the artists today, it would just be listen to God, do what He's telling you to do, and don't be afraid of what the outcome is going to be, because you're following what He's calling you to do.
Goes right along with that scriptures that says to do all things unto God rather than man. And that's just so beautiful. My friend, thank you for this time today. You are just incredible. And I appreciate your experience and your authenticity and just how you're so real and generous, very, very generous. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.